Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at Morphy's with a pair of Colt Derringers. They're really tiny. We'll zoom in just a moment. We have a first model and a third model here. And these come right from the middle of the time frame of Derringer popularity, because Derringers have been popular from the very beginning of firearms all the way to still present day today. There are a couple of companies that are still newly producing guns very much like this. Now, the name Derringer comes from Henry Derringer, who lived in Philadelphia and manufactured a also .41 caliber single-shot percussion pistol that he called the Philadelphia Derringer. This became quite notable when one of them was used by John Wilkes Booth to assassinate then President Abraham Lincoln. And in the reporting afterwards, the name Derringer actually kind of became a catch-all term for that type of gun. A very small, very concealable, single-shot pocket gun, pocket pistol. And the name stuck. And even today, we refer to these things as Derringers. It's kind of interesting, though, the spelling was messed up at the same time. Henry Derringer spelled his name with one R, and they're typically spelled today with two R's. Anyway. Always been a popular type of gun. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at these rather than me talk about them out here where you can barely see what we're talking about. First model and third model kind of makes one think that this is a development of a single design. In reality, it's not. We have two totally separate designs. So we're going to take the third model here and set it aside for the moment and focus on this one to begin with. This is a design that was patented by a guy named Daniel Moore. He had two patents, actually, one in 1861, one in 1863. He is also known for designing a teat-fire revolver with a really unique cartridge specifically designed to get around the Rollin Moore, or the Rollin White patent on bored through cylinders in revolvers. So anyway, I have a separate video on the Moore teat-fire revolver that I'll link at the end of this. So if you're interested in what else Daniel Moore was doing, you can check that out. But he designed a single-shot .41 rimfire Derringer, and the way this works is that the barrel actually rotates down around this screw to the underside. And Moore would make these guns for about 4 years. In 1865, he sold his rights to a company, the National Firearms Company, out of Brooklyn, New York. Not very likely that there would be firearms companies operating out of Brooklyn today, but there were in the 1860s. So National had the capital, and they went on producing these, and National would make about 12,000 of these, this pattern of Derringer, between 1865 and 1870. This sort of gun was very popular. It's obviously super easy to conceal. These are guns that could be carried in environments where it wasn't either legally or socially permitted to be open carrying a firearm, or if one's dress and manner simply didn't work with the carry of a large revolver, well, you can still toss one of these in a pocket, perhaps even a vest pocket. If you're out on the frontier, you can toss one in your boot. But very common self-defense pistol of the latter half of the 1800s. Now, a couple other quick notes on the operation of this. The extractor on this is what's called a knife blade extractor, and it's a little piece of sheet metal right here that's in between the barrel and the frame. And the way that works is that it's not sharpened, but, well, sort of sharpened right up here at the top. Not that it'll cut you, but you put a cartridge, a rimfire cartridge in here, and the rim's going to sit on top of that extractor. When you rotate the barrel all the way in, well, it's going to press up in between the frame and the barrel. It'll fire just fine. So you cock the hammer, there's your firing pin. You have this little sheath trigger here. Pull the trigger. I'm going to drop this gently. Bang! You've just fired the gun. Now, to unload it, you first have to put the gun at half cock, then pull this little button backwards that way. That unlocks the barrel. And as you rotate the barrel open, that extractor is still sitting under the rim of the cartridge, and it gets a little bit wider there. And that pulls the cartridge just a tiny bit, about a millimeter, out of the chamber. Well, that's enough if it hasn't contracted all the way down. If you have a broken case, a cracked case, if the case is for whatever reason stuck in the chamber, that extractor pulls it out, gives you a nice bit of leverage, pulls the cartridge out of the chamber enough that you can then lift it out with your hands and reload a second one. So it's not an ejector, it's just meant to give you that initial bit of extraction to unstick a cartridge from the chamber. And so that's the system that Moore came up with. The other thing that obviously brings up a question here is the very weird shape of this thing. It's all metal, and like this is not an ergonomic, practical sort of design. It's clunky and weird. However, the rationale for it is that it's very much intended to be a hand-to-hand weapon as well. So you have one shot, you're not going to be reloading it rapidly. After you have fired it, you can then grasp it like this, note the thumb pad right there on the top, and should your one shot not have done the job effectively, you can hit someone with the butt of the grip, and it's actually going to be a fairly effective, essentially a brass knuckle. Not that uncommon among pocket pistol design of the time, but something that was very specifically done by Moore. Now, the National Firearms Company, as I said, made about 12,000 of these until 1870, when they went and sold out to Colt. And thus, we find this with Colt markings on it. Colt's Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company, Hartford, Connecticut, the #1 pattern. Colt bought out the National Firearms Company because in a very modern sort of way, they wanted to get in on the market for rimfire Derringers. Colt obviously had their own intellectual property and designs for revolvers, but this was a significant portion of the firearms market, and Colt figured the best way to get into it was just to find someone else who was already making a good popular product, but was a small company, and just buy them outright. The sort of thing we see all the time today in tech companies. Well, that's exactly what Colt did. They would introduce and well, they didn't introduce, they continued to manufacture these guns. They just moved the production down to Hartford. They brought a couple of the key people from Brooklyn down to Hartford to continue making these guns for Colt. The #1 is this pattern, of course, with the all metal frame. The #2, which I don't have an example of here to show you, is the exact same gun, but it has either wood, typically wood, or sometimes ivory grips on it. So basic shape's the same, but instead of casting the whole frame in metal, it's cut away a bit and there are wooden grip panels on it. These are serialized, so on the bottom of the grip and the bottom of the barrel, we have matching serial numbers, 4310. There was a separate serial number range for the #1 and the #2 models. In total, they made about 6,500 of the #1s, like this, iron framed, and about 9,500 of the #2s, which have the wooden grips. And those were all made between 1870 and approximately 1890. Now let's bring back that third pattern gun. As you can see, this is a totally different design. For this guy, we already have it at half cock, and just crank the barrel to the side to open it. This is almost certainly a simpler gun to manufacture. It has a better style of ejector in it. It has a grip that's a little more suitable to actually shooting, perhaps a little less suitable to hitting someone with, but maybe not. You know, that still works pretty effectively. Well, this, the #3, is a design by F. Alexander Thuer. Thuer was an engineer at Colt. He'd been at Colt since nearly the beginning of the operation of Colt's Hartford plant, and he is probably best, well, this is probably the most successful firearm that he designed, but he's probably best known for his Thuer rimfire conversion of Colt revolvers. So Rollin White's patent prohibited anybody else from essentially making a modern cartridge revolver until 1870. And so Thuer came up with a conversion that would turn Colt's muzzle-loading percussion revolvers into rimfire revolvers. And as soon as that Rollin White patent expired, Colt began manufacturing them and would make them until 1872, when they were able to get their own native cartridge revolver up and running. And that, of course, was the single-action army of massive, massive success and fame. Well, at about the same time, Thuer also went ahead and just came up with a better design for a 41 rimfire Derringer, and that's this side-tilting design. So this bit right here is a combined barrel locking detent and extractor. This one is spring powered, so you have to use a little bit of force to snap the barrel in. There's no fully locking latch or anything. It's just spring pressure on that detent. So you pop it open and it will simultaneously extract the cartridge. Now, because it's spring powered, in theory, if the cartridge is a little bit small and well made and properly sized, and the spring's nice and clean, you could get pretty darn good extraction or even ejection with this system. But if it gets dirty, if the spring gets weak, then you're going to get pretty poor extraction. It's sort of the trade-off with the knife blade system. With the knife blade system over here on Moore's design, it's always going to work, but it's never going to work really well. Thuer's could work really well or could work kind of poorly, depending on its condition. So take your pick. They're both chambered for 41 rimfire. These are just marked with a big old Colt name on top. There are some variations in this. There are some that will actually have a rampant Colt pony marked on them. Those command a higher premium value. A small number of the early designed ones actually have sort of a bolster here, a little bit of extra material around the barrel screw. They got rid of that fairly quickly. See, it's marked 41 caliber right there. This third pattern went into production in either 1872 or 1875, depending on the sources that you see, remained in production until, believe it or not, 1912, probably a bit later than people might expect, with a grand total of 48,000 manufactured, so substantially more successful than the Moore pattern guns that Colt just bought from the National Firearms Company. Now, Colt would actually bring this back. There is a so-called fourth pattern of this that went into production in the 1950s and has been periodically run on and off. Those are actually in 22 rimfire because the 41 rimfire cartridge is essentially unavailable anymore and has been for a long time. This is the standard pattern of the third model Colt. It actually has a bronze frame that is plated, in this case with nickel. Occasionally they'd plate them with silver. It has a blued barrel on it. Standard barrel length here is 2.5 inches. There was, because this was a commercial gun that was in production for many decades, there are variations. There are some that were made with shorter or longer barrels. There are some examples of 41 centerfire versions. That's the only other cartridge that these were manufactured in, is 41 centerfire, and those are really quite scarce. The 41 rimfire was made in much larger quantities. To be honest, neither of these guns is particularly rare today. The third model is certainly the easier model to find than the first and seconds, but there are enough of all of them floating around that for the interested person, they're available, certainly like these two are. But I thought it would be interesting to take a look at these and look at a few different patterns and makes of Derringers to get a better feel for what the market was like during the latter half of the 1800s when the 41 rimfire Derringers were really in their heyday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.